to another episode of Taps Talk. It's your favorite host, Kudisa Muhammad, and my co-host, Marcus Aceves Lewis, is still on vacation. But I'm so excited to be here with Mr. Taylor Johnson with United Against Human Trafficking.
Hello, Kudisa. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, yeah.
So
a little toasty in here, but we're good.
Okay, yeah. So let's go ahead and jump right in it.
Yeah.
What would you define human trafficking as to our audience, and inform us of how prevalent it is?
So, it is my job to answer that question, and it's not one that I think can be boiled down into just, what is it in a couple sentences, right? Mm-hmm. It's a really complex, complicated issue. So I'm going to do my best to make it short. But I think human trafficking, when people hear those words, I think where their mind goes usually is Taken.
Right.
Have you seen Taken?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. I will have a specific set of skills.
I will find you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That movie is a very violent movie, and there is a kidnapping and there are drugs involved, and I think the reason that people make that connection is because in the movie they say, oh, this is human trafficking. These are human traffickers that are doing this. And I think that becomes dangerous when you are aware of the fact that not every human trafficking situation looks like that. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but that's actually one of the least common ways that it happens. So if we equate every situation to violence, a kidnapping, then other situations that are, again, more common might just be missed. Yeah.
Okay, so if you could just share a little bit about your background and what drew you to this organization.
Absolutely. So throughout my growings up, there were some family things, family dynamics that were really interesting. And so I grew up wanting to be a substance abuse counselor, family recovery counselor, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So I'm a social worker. My background is I have a BSW. And through my internship, my program director placed me at a Yes Prep, which is, for those who don't know, it's a low-income public charter school. Mm-hmm. And I basically was going to be playing the role of a intern version of a student support counselor. Okay. So if there was a kiddo who was not getting the education accommodations that they needed, if they were having trouble with food insecurity, any kind of thing like that, then that would be kind of my role, or just to support them and listen to them. Mm-hmm. That would be kind of my role. And I actually realized working with students, youth, whatever, is really rewarding. And while I was in college, I took a class. It was ODSJ, which is Oppression, Diversity, and Social Justice. And a volunteer from United Against Human Trafficking, actually came and spoke in our class. And it just always stuck with me. Just all of the knowledge that they imparted was really valuable to me, and it's something like a cause that I felt really passionate about. And one day I was looking for jobs, applying and interviewing, and UAHT was there. And I said, okay, well, there's this issue that I'm passionate about, and I get to work with the population that I just recently discovered I really love working with. So I went for it, and here we are.
The rest is history.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Houston is, of course, identified as a hotbed for human trafficking. Mm-hmm. Is this true, and what is being done to correct this?
So that is something that we hear a lot, is a hotbed, or the word that we typically hear more is a hub for human trafficking. Mm-hmm. We kind of like to change people's idea about that. We try to ask them to change their language around that, because we like to call ourselves a solution city. So there's a lot of that, and I can talk about that in a second, but you have to think about human trafficking as not only a Houston issue, right? Because it is, but it's also a Texas issue. Mm-hmm. So in Houston, we're really spread out. We have a really diverse ethnic, racial population, which can make it really easy for traffickers and victims to kind of blend in, especially our foreign national population. We have a really diverse labor sector, so there's all kinds of industries that are present here in Houston. So it is a Houston issue, but it's a Texas issue as well, like I said. UT Austin did a study a few years ago, and they estimated that about 313,000 people were victims of human trafficking just in Texas. Mm-hmm. So that study, it looked at the number of minor sex trafficking victims, which was estimated to be 79,000, and then labor trafficking victims, which was estimated to be 234,000. But that study didn't account for adult victims of sex trafficking. So that 313,000 number is kind of a conservative estimate. And the thing about all these numbers, like if I say any numbers, right, like they're not 100% accurate, because human trafficking is a very hidden crime. It's not something where a victim says, hey, I know you're doing a study about the number of victims and survivors of human trafficking. Can you make sure that my name is on there, right? There's still, unfortunately, stigma attached to it. A lot of victims don't even identify as victims because their traffickers are their partners, their boyfriends, their employers sometimes. And they're subjected to force, fraud, and coercion. That's how we kind of define what a human trafficking situation is, and all of those things can prevent them from saying, "Hey, this is happening to me," because their traffickers are saying, "Well, if you say anything to anybody, that I'm going to hurt you. I can hurt your family." Right. If like, let's say a trafficker has like nudes or videos of them doing sexual things, they can say, I can post this online for strangers to see, or friends, family, teachers to see. And there's just a lot of circumstances that people don't want to put themselves in even more risk, right? So
how can our audience protect themselves and others from human trafficking?
So there are two major things that I would say that people can do to protect themselves and the people they care about. Be really careful about social media use. And I'm always afraid that when I talk about this, it's going to come off as, oh, this is another person who's preaching at us to be really safe on social media, but it's really true. Right. Social media gives traffickers access to pretty much anybody that they want. And if you think about the way that we use social media, we post insanely personal details of our everyday life. So if someone goes to a Twitter account of a person and they're talking about how depressed they are, how bad they need money because maybe they lost their job, their parents lost their jobs, nobody loves me or cares about me. Those are things that traffickers actively look for. Right. And they'll slide in the DMs and they'll try to boyfriend someone or girlfriend, whatever. And so just being really careful about social media use. And then the other one is being aware of the red flags. You can do research, but some of the ones that I really like to talk about, if someone shows up to school and they're really tired all the time, their grades start falling, they start treating people different, or they change their friend group really drastically. If they stop showing up to school at all, that's another one. If they are kind of unclear, they won't tell you who they're hanging out with or what they're doing. So there was a case that I was a part of where I was interviewing one of the people we thought might have been being trafficked, and I was asking, so what did you do over the weekend? Oh, I worked. It's like, okay, well, what were you doing? Oh, I just do this and that. Who do you work for? Oh, sometimes my cousin. And it's like scripted or like inconsistent, vague, those kinds of things. Right. So be aware of the red flags and don't be afraid to share them. It's especially the last few months, like think about all the information that's being shared among people. It's really important, and don't be afraid to speak up. Like if you see something, you have to say something, because that person might not have the ability or the, they might be under force, fraud, or coercion that would prevent them from speaking up about their situation.
Right, 100%. Yeah. We hear a lot of people using the word victim, the term victim, to describe those who have been subjected to human trafficking. What do you think about this?
So I think in a lot of circles, it's really important that we try to use the word survivor whenever possible. I think those two terms are sometimes used interchangeably, and I think even I'm guilty of that as someone who's in the movement. I think I'm guilty of that to a point. But it is important when we can to use the word survivor, because we want to not have a person's identity be completely revolved around their experience with trafficking, because that's just going to re-traumatize them. They're just going to stay in that place, and they're not going to be able to move on effectively. So. Okay. Yeah. So
we've been shedding some light on human trafficking. There's been some heavy information. Yeah. So maybe just share a little bit of an uplifting story that you've experienced while working with this organization.
So, a lot of times, what I think is really important is whenever I know that my messaging or the messaging of the organization is coming across effectively. So an example of that was we do work with the youth, right? But we also work with parents, because it's important for them to know also the red flags and the signs and what to do. And there was a parent event I did, and one of the parents came up and talked to me afterwards, and they were saying, yeah, I've had a training on human trafficking before, but I wanted to share something with you. And I said, okay, yeah, what is it? And they said that their daughter had been, like a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier, their grades were slipping. They didn't want to go to school anymore. They were shutting down. They weren't saying like what they were doing or who they were hanging out with. Turns out they just had undiagnosed ADHD. Mm. But a lot of those red flags of human trafficking are red flags for a lot of other situations. It's not human trafficking specific, but if you are aware that those red flags exist, then you're going to examine things in a different way. So, and even in my time at UAHT, when I started to hear about some of these red flags, I go to the grocery store, and sometimes I just see stuff and I look at it differently. It changes your worldview when you're aware of these. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of opens your eyes, like you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So as we close, if you could just share with our audience some resources that are available to the community.
Yeah. So you can always call UAHT. UAHT.org is a place where you can find all of our information. If you want to have us come and speak at your school, at your church, at your organization, whatever have you, we are always open to doing that, because one thing that we are really passionate about is making sure that as many people as possible are aware about this issue of human trafficking. Mm-hmm. I would say in addition to that, probably the best resource that I can give is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The number is 1-888-3737-888. It's a 24-hour hotline that speaks over 200 languages. The coolest thing about it is you can call and report anonymously. So one of the barriers to people actually reaching out for help is, well, my trafficker said that if I try to report a situation, try to escape or try to get out, then they're going to harm me, they're going to harm my friends, my family, whatever have you. You can report anonymously. So you can just say, hey, I don't want you to know who I am, but this is the situation that I'm in, or a friend of mine is in, or I'm out in the community and I saw something that didn't feel right. Mm-hmm. A lot of times if you have that gut feeling, you have to follow that. Right. Yeah, you can call and report anonymously, and I think that's just the coolest thing ever. That's probably my favorite resource anyway.
Okay, so that's all we have for today. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. This was honestly amazing information. You spoke about how you see things differently now that you're informed, and I can definitely say that now that I'm informed, I'm definitely going to have an eye out for these things. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching another episode of TAPS Talk, where we spoke with Mr. Taylor Johnson with the United Against Human Trafficking. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.